Have you ever walked into a room and, half betrug, forgotten why you came here? Like, 10 times AD?
If so, welcome to the Just 5 More Minutes Club, where procrastination reigns supreme and time, poor thing, is that friend who always waits with its arms crossed. For those with ADHD, this imaginary just 5 more minutes button seems to be stuck in your brain, with no way to turn it off. It's that moment when you know you should start a task, but an internal voice, which has a great talent for persuasion, says, "Come on, just 5 more minutes on your phone, it won't hurt." And out of nowhere, you find yourself scrolling through memes or organizing your pen drawer as if it were the most urgent thing in the world. But don't worry, it's not laziness. Nor a lack of willpower. The ADHD brain is a little different in this regard, and it's not your fault that this snooze button is almost a default feature installed at the factory. Time becomes an enemy that feels like it's running a marathon while you try to keep up at a snail's pace. Here, the so-called infinite loop is not just a joke, it's a real experience, which makes the day seem full of tasks that never start, or when they do start are interrupted 1,000 times by the famous just 5 more minutes. Let's understand together why this button insists on not turning off, and who knows, find a way to not get stuck in this eternal loop. If there's one thing that ADHD loves to challenge, it's the concept of time. For those who don't have it, the clock is that trustworthy companion that accurately marks the hours, minutes, and seconds. For those with ADHD, however, time becomes a kind of crazy chameleon. You know when you're in front of the computer thinking that 5 minutes have passed, but in fact it's already been 40? Or when you promise yourself just 5 more minutes, and suddenly, the sun is already setting on the horizon. Well, the clock in this universe is a bit mischievous. This happens because the ADHD brain has a perception of time that seems elastic. Sometimes it stretches, sometimes it shrinks. It's as if your internal clock is trying to keep up with a rave party with electronic music, while you just want a quiet coffee. This time distortion gets in the way not only when it comes to meeting deadlines, but also in everyday tasks, getting out of bed, starting work, remembering appointments. Everything becomes a game of hide and seek with time. But don't worry, it's not all despair. There are tricks to trick the rebellious clock. For example, timers, those alarm clocks that help transform invisible time into something tangible. Or dividing a giant task into small pieces, like eating a cake slice by slice, so as not to get sick. In the end, learning to deal with this crooked perception of time is like making friends with a stubborn clock. You won't be able to control it completely, but you can make the two coexist happily. Who has never felt trapped in that classic trap of just one more episode?
So the remote control.
For those with ADHD, this phrase is like a mantra that plays on loop when the focus decides to do the famous musical chairs. It arrives, it leaves, it comes back, it disappears. The brain with ADHD is like the owner of 72 open tabs in the browser, except that none of them play music, and you don't know which tab has the important document you needed. Meanwhile, your attention jumps from one thing to another like a curious cat. This isn't a lack of interest or laziness. It's just that the brain goes crazy trying to decide where to go, and when one thing captures your attention, it quickly loses its place to the next distraction.
The result?
An endless cycle of starting and not finishing, or finishing only half of things. But there's a curious side. Sometimes when something really catches your attention, ADHD can go into hyperfocus mode, that superpower of diving so deeply into a task that the world around you disappears. The problem is that this hyperfocus is unpredictable, and it can appear at the wrong time with the wrong task. The good news? You can try to tame this beast. Simple techniques, such as scheduled breaks, environments with fewer distractions and magic to-do lists, the ones that let you check off what you've done and feel like you're winning a medal, help to overcome the broken focus. Basically, understanding this back and forth of attention is a huge step towards not feeling like a hostage to your own brain, and starting to have a little more fun in this game of just one more episode. If procrastination were a sport, people with ADHD would be on the podium, and not always with pride, right? But before you blame yourself for leaving it for later, it's worth remembering that this isn't laziness or a lack of will. It's actually a real neurological challenge that makes the brain think, okay, boring task? Let's delay it a little bit. What seems like just pushing it along has its roots in the way the brain works, especially in the difficulty in regulating motivation, impulse, and reward. In other words, your brain is asking for a little more stimulation to really focus on a task, or it simply gets distracted by more interesting things at the time. Procrastination in ADHD is like that somewhat clumsy superpower that tries to protect you from stress, even if it ends up creating more anxiety. It's a way of dealing with overload, but it can become a cycle that's hard to break. Here, the trick is to change your perspective, from "I'm lazy" to "my brain has a different way of working." Without judgment, with more patience and, of course, a good dose of humor so as not to let the weight of the subject turn into a drama. Because accepting that this delay has a neurological explanation is the first step to treating yourself with care and starting to untangle this knot, one step at a time, even if sometimes it's just 5 minutes at a time. After understanding this just 5 more minutes loop, you might be thinking, now, how do I get out of this? The good news is that you don't need to be a superhero to start turning this game around. Just a few simple strategies and a lot of patience with yourself. Imagine your brain as an old video game that takes a long time to load. You can play, but you need some breaks, some tricks, and sometimes a basic reset. Using timers to divide your time, celebrating even the smallest achievement, like I managed to start this task, and allowing yourself to rest without feeling guilty can make a huge difference.
Another tip?
Turn tasks into smaller challenges, like levels in a game, where each step gets a level up, and you advance slowly but advancing. And if that inner voice insists on just 5 more minutes, how about responding with fine, just 5 minutes, but then we'll start for real. In the end, the secret is not to put too much pressure on yourself and recognize that each day is a new chance to try again, without pressure. The ADHD loop may be endless, but with the right tools and a kind eye, you can create shortcuts, open doors, and most importantly, not feel alone in this adventure. So, if the just 5 more minutes button keeps insisting, take a deep breath, smile, and remember, you're not alone in all this madness. We'll do it the way we can, with humor and a little lightness, because in the end, the important thing is to move forward, one step or 5 minutes at a time.